I'm Zeinab Badawi. Welcome from Sweden. We're in the Royal Palace in Stockholm in the King's Library. We're surrounded by books which have influenced our thinking throughout the ages. A good place, don't you agree, to introduce you to the thinking of our Nobel Laureates. Around us here are some of the best brains in their fields: chemistry, physics, medicine and economics. And this is a real occasion because it's the first time that most of this year's winners have been brought together on TV. We're going to be hearing what has inspired them and how their discoveries are helping us meet the key global challenges of our day. So, Nobel Laureates, congratulations to you all. I feel quite outnumbered, actually. Now, many people say this is the mother of all prizes. What does it mean to you all winning this? Elinor Ostrom, double congratulations to you. Because you are the first woman to have ever won the Nobel Prize for Economics.
Well, thank you very much. Obviously, this is a big event for anyone in their life. And when you were born poor, like I was, and had to struggle to get even through college, being able to have this kind of recognition is very, very much appreciated.
Oh, well, Elinor, those words are going to inspire an awful lot of people. Thank you for being so frank there straight away. I'm going to do ladies first, actually, if you don't mind, gentlemen. Carol Greider, you won you won jointly the prize for medicine. What does it mean to you?
It feels really like an honor to be able to really represent all of the people that have worked together in the telomere field to bring us here. It was really a group of people over a period of years that made clear what the meaning of the work was.
And Elizabeth Blackburn, you also won the prize for medicine.
And I think what really made me most excited was recognizing the way basic science can have effects that may play into realms we never dreamed of before. And so just searching and doing basic science can lead to things that are medically relevant. And that recognition that the prize brought of that, I was particularly happy about.
Good. And Ada Yonath from Israel, you also shared the prize for chemistry. Now you've won it, you're going to just sort of say, OK, I've got this ultimate accolade. I'm going to be resting on my laurels. Nothing more for me to do.
Resting is a very hard work. You have to rest all the time. Make sure that you're resting. I think that if I have some things to do, it's easier for me. I don't have to decide. No. So if you ask what does it mean to me, I think that the three previous people said all what I would have said. Teamwork, a common effort, basic science that became also practical, and being from a poor family and understanding that we can get to heights that we dream about.
Oh, that's also very nice to hear. Somebody also from a modest background. We'll hear a bit more about that a little bit later. OK, I'm going to come to you. George Smith, you shared the prize with your colleague here for physics. So what does it mean to you as well? Because I have to say, you waited 40 years, didn't you, since your invention to win the Nobel Prize. They weren't that quick handing it out to you.
That's correct. I'm just very happy that I lasted long enough to get there. But it's, of course, a tremendous boost to one's ego. And what we did invent did have a fair impact on the world, and it's nice to see that that's recognized.
Willard, Boyle, yes, yeah. you shared the prize for physics.
That's right. George and I have been working together for many, many years, and we always enjoy it, and this is a particularly pleasant occasion to be with all these people, too. The thing I guess I wanted to emphasize was that our invention of the charge-coupled device, which is an image sensor, is really still growing, and I think the satisfaction is that it was started off as basic research, but as time goes on, it's finding broader and broader applications.
OK, Venkatraman, Ramakrishnan, you shared the prize for chemistry along with Ada, another of your colleagues, and what does it mean? I mean, do you feel that you all deserved it, this prize?
No, I have to say I'm deeply ambivalent, and I may sound a bit cantankerous, but I think prizes convey the wrong impression of how science is done. Science is done by a huge community of people, all of whom contribute ideas. And Some of us contribute ideas that are somewhat more important than others, but we all build on even the smallest ideas in our field. And so to young people who are entering science, you know, they often ask, what does it take to win a Nobel Prize? That's the wrong question. The real question is, what interests you? What fascinates you? And go for that.
But you're
and
glad to have
forget
won
about
the prize, though, Venki, all the same, aren't you?
Of course I am.
You're not going to do a Jean-Paul Sartre and turn it down.
No,
well, you haven't, have you?
It's too late. I mean, I would be a hypocrite now, right? If I sat here and said I'm going to do a Jean-Paul Sartre, I mean, I think it's psychologically, as a human being, we all want recognition, okay? And we all appreciate recognition, and so it's psychologically essentially impossible.
Tom Stites, you also won the prize for chemistry. Do you share that ambivalence of Venki?
Actually, Venki's so articulate. He put my thoughts very much the same way. It's a large group that works together, but the thing that I appreciate is the recognition for the group. And I take the prize to be the recognition that the work that the group did on the ribosome structure is appreciated, and it gives us an opportunity to convey how important this basic research, which is the real reason why we did it, is going to have applications. In fact, it's being used for drug design, and it's going to be very important.
Gosh, what a modest bunch you are. I mean, the only one who's admitted to any ego was you, George, wasn't he? But let's see what you have to say.
Well,
let's see what Jack Szostak has to say. You shared the prize for medicine, so where do you stand on what the Nobel Prize means to you?
Well, of course, it's wonderful to get this kind of recognition for our work that was done so long ago. It's also wonderful to share it with colleagues and friends, Carol and Liz. That's particularly nice. I guess I could just add that when we were doing the work, we weren't thinking that anything like this would ever happen, right? We were just curious about a little puzzle, a long-standing puzzle in science. And then years later, it led to this.
Here you are. So, all right. Well, good. And last but not least, Oliver Williamson. You also won half of the economics prize. Different work from Elinor. But are you quite happy? You feel that your work really does deserve this this prize?
Well, I don't want to answer it that way.
I'm trying to encourage you there. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great honor, and I'm very pleased. And one of the great pleasures is so many other people in the world with whom I've worked with, you know, as students, as teachers, as colleagues, and family and the like, are so celebratory about it. It is such spontaneous joy.
Right. I just want to ask you what you think about the Nobel Prize in sort of more general terms, because obviously the Nobel Peace Prize, which is awarded by a parliamentary committee in Oslo in Norway, because Alfred Nobel, when he set up the Nobel Prize, said, I want the Norwegians to decide the Peace Prize. Now, this year it went to President Barack Obama, and, you know, there were people who started sort of scratching their heads. I mean, should somebody be awarded a Nobel Prize at the beginning of their career? I mean, you've all done it after sort of many decades in some cases of work. I mean, does anybody have a view on that, whether that's in keeping with the spirit of Alfred Nobel?
It was a mistake. I think that prizes like that should only be awarded for accomplishments and not for some potential promise of the future.
I think the Peace Prize is different, right? It's political, it's an expression of support, and I think it's great.
This is a prize that was awarded to Yasser Arafat and Henry Kissinger, but not to Mahatma Gandhi, okay? So let's put the Peace Prize in perspective.
Doesn't sound like you're a big fan of it in some ways. Anybody else got a view on that, on whether somebody like Barack Obama should have been given?
Yes, I think that he should have been given it because he didn't have enough time to make a big mistake.
So it kind of binds him to it.
But I do agree, it would have been unusual for us to get the prize 10 years ago for the promise of solving the structure of the ribosome.
Actually, 30 years ago.
Excuse me.
You all have had to wait a bit, yeah.
He changed a lot in the Americans' view on what the president is, and paved a way towards having presidents that were not before and were actually rejected. And maybe this is achievement or sort of achievement that should be taken into account. But I really don't want to go into American politics. I have enough.
No, we're not. I just want to get your general view. That brings me to a broader subject that I want to hear what you all say. You're all scientists, and there's been quite a lot of controversy triggered by a climate change row started in the United Kingdom, where some climate change scientists were accused of either manipulating or suppressing scientific data in order to advance the theory that global warming is man-made. Now, I don't want to talk about global warming and whether it is man-made or not, but let's just use that as a springboard to see whether you feel as scientists, in the light of this and other similar controversies, that the integrity of science is under attack.
Let's look at the science. Let's not look at the storms in teacups. Let's look at actually what the science of climate science is about, and let's look at that information, not these sorts of whipped up sort of frenzies that are preoccupying the media. And well, I think we should think about...
You're blaming us.
Of course.
You always blame us. I mean, that is an easy one. Elizabeth, I am not going to let you off so lightly, because I know that you served under George Bush between 2002 2004 on a federal commission looking at stem cell research. Now, you were pushed off that commission because your science wasn't consistent with the ban which George Bush, or your view
It
rather.
wasn't my view. It was just my insistence that any body looking at issues that are going to have science policy ramifications should take the scientific evidence into account as best you can. I was on a commission writing reports, and when you write reports, you want the report to be as accurate as possible, because if it's going to be an advisory basis for policy, you want it to have as correct assessment of the science as possible. And I kept arguing that I didn't see that was going into the reports.
To get back to your earlier question about, you know, the sort of misrepresentation in science, science has always had frauds, okay? But
well, we don't know whether there is fraud, because there's an inquiry going on to this particular
No, I'm not
controversy.
saying this was a fraud, but I'm saying that there have always been problems in science. But it's a self-correcting mechanism. Scientists are humans, but science as an endeavor has built-in checks and balances. And one of them is that if something is false, if something is interesting and it's false, other people will want to reproduce it. And they'll find that they can't, and then eventually things correct themselves.
Okay, so let's just get the record straight then. Very quickly, on this question of climate change, anybody who is, if I could put it this way, a climate change denier?
I think the actual data is only really understood by experts, I think. I mean, we can understand the summaries that the experts give us, and we have to trust that a large body of scientists who are experts in this field have the integrity, and we have to believe what they say is right, just as I hope that they'll believe us when we talk about ribosome structure. So I think that science is based on trust and integrity.
But I watched my salt marsh eroding in front of my house, and my geologist friends say that's because the sea levels are rising.
And you believe them?
I think they
You don't
may
say,
have
show
a
me the
point.
data.
It seems to me that there's a lot of selective information being picked by certain people in this community of climate change. And it's very difficult, I think, for the average person to know whether what you're seeing is picked data or not. I mean, all these questions with regard to the ice in the Antarctic, how thick is it? I think you'll find that there's one part of it that's growing and another part that is shrinking. And unfortunately, there are some people that are selecting the information from that and using it for their own personal advantage. And I don't know how the average person on the street can tell whether the information that you're getting is selected information or not. And that's, I think, a very serious problem for all of us.
I think the philosophy of science is that we are there to ask questions, things that raise curiosity in us or passion to understand. And many times we have to look at concepts that are believed and find out whether there is still justification for it.
But you try and give answers, don't you?
Yeah, but we are, what I'm trying to say is our nature is to suspect and to look for all ways we can check things. whereas politicians have a different attitude.
I think the other
We don't know the
problem
science of
here
climate
is it
change.
takes time really to
Do you
sort
know
these
that?
things out. The thing that's running through my mind right now is how long it took science to get us straightened out with regard to the dangers of smoking cigarettes. It took a long, long time. I mean, it's a pretty obvious thing that you smoke a cigarette and you get killed. They sold cigarettes and kept on selling cigarettes and still sell
That's
cigarettes.
true. And scientists disagree on all sorts of things. I mean, BSE,
But
for
in that
instance.
case,
Yeah, go on.
the science was clear for a long time. It took policy decades to catch up.
Right.
And why was that, do you think, Jack? Because you shared the prize for
Well,
medicine.
there were
Why
all
was that?
kinds of
there are
conflicts
taxes on
of interest,
cigarettes.
and people have
People make
different
money out of
values.
But why didn't the scientific community, I mean, I know you weren't around then, but why didn't the scientific community say, look, politicians, ministers, the science is there, it's obvious, it's so bad for you?
They did.
Why would they not listen? So, I
They're
mean,
not listened because they're powerful
listen to us.
lobbies
Okay.
that gain money from selling cigarettes.
and do you think that the world should listen more to scientists? I mean, even today?
I think
And
so.
to lobbyists, yes.
But do you think, I mean, is your voice
I think so.
Listen
I mean,
to-
scientists disagree only at the frontiers where things are not clear. But beneath the frontier is a solid body of science on which no one disagrees. Okay, we don't disagree about evolution. We don't disagree about, the nature of chemical bonds. There are all sorts of things.
But you disagree on a lot of things, and we saw in Britain,
but wait a
BSC,
second.
should you kill the cows, should you
Wait,
not,
wait,
swine
wait a second.
flu, we've got different
Those are
views.
policies.
Those are
There's a
policies.
science
But-
policy,
but
which is
people
right at
bring
the
out-
cutting edge of what's going on.
But people bring out a scientist to back this view, a scientist to back that view.
What
actually
Venki was saying, and I wanted to say too earlier, we don't disagree about the gravity, for instance. This is a principle, scientific principle. We don't even disagree about the camera that he made. The camera works.
We're going to talk about that, actually. Yeah.
No
Well, thank
matter
you.
what you think
Okay.
about cigarettes.
Let's talk about your discoveries briefly, and let's start off with the camera, since you've just mentioned it for us, Ada. Now, George and Bill, you
Thinking
won.
of that,
Oh, is that it? Cheese. So that's it. Oh, you're showing us the practical application of your charge-coupled
And we
device.
agree about it
Which
fully.
is a device which enables us to take pictures more cheaply, reliably, and quickly without the need for film. So it's the digital camera which you just showed us. Yeah. Did you get a good picture there, by the way? Not sure it was my best side.
I think you need a little more makeup on your nose for this.
Makeup, where are you? So, okay, all right. So, George and Bill, yeah, you did this, as we said, about 40 years ago. You brought about the digital camera, helped improve TV cameras, that kind of thing. But just tell us about the applications of your CCD, charge-coupled device, this device that you're talking about. Can we see the device, by the way, George?
Oh, yes. I have one right here on my tie.
Oh, how convenient. Can you
Of
get
course,
it?
I can't. There
there
it
it
is. That is
Let me just hold it to
a
the camera.
working CCD that I got from Sony, which they implanted on the tie.
Do you see that, everybody? Isn't that amazing? That's
And
the
if you compare
CCD.
that, for instance, to the old camera tubes that they had in the TV cameras, it's quite a reduction in size.
You can say
and
that again.
Cost
And Bill,
reliability.
okay, Bill, tell us, I mean, just how this has helped transform our lives.
Well, I can be personal about that because I had an operation for a gallbladder, and that involves cutting something here. They used a CCD and didn't have to do any cutting at all. Just a tiny little probe went in and then just fixed it up, and I was out the next day from the hospital. And normally it would be a very costly and time-consuming operation.
Great.
So that in medicine, it's just now beginning to play a really important role, and it goes on in other areas as well.
And George, I mean, what else? I mean, the digital camera, mobile phones, taking pictures.
That's a very good example. If you wanted to send a photograph to your mother 2,000 miles away, you would have to take a picture, get the film out of the camera, take it down to the drugstore, have it developed, get the print back, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, drop it in the mailbox, and then wait for the system to slowly get it across the nation.
Haven't got the patience for that.
And nowadays, what I can do is smile.
Oh, another picture.
And if I press the right button, which I probably can't do, you can send it directly to her in
But
a
it's
flick
not
of a
just for
finger.
that, though, is it? I mean, we know that, for instance, in countries, I mean, like in Burma, for instance, where we had all those protests by the monks and so on, and in Iran more recently, people use these pictures, don't they, to convey what's
yes.
going on, where TV cameras can't get in.
And sending it over the internet also. The nice fiber optics
So it helps
communication
transparency,
system
doesn't
that
it?
we have.
Yeah. I want to move to you, chemist. Let's take you as a group. I am going to say what you won the prize for, because I will do it in just one sentence, and I know if I ask you to do it, you'll give me a very complicated answer. Now, you all won the prize for ribosomes, and these are molecular machines which make proteins that carry out all the functions of the cell.
According to the genetic code.
I knew you would qualify it, but thank you.
That's what genes
Okay, according to
This is how we make genes.
Okay,
Not
that's
only
fine.
ribosomes.
Okay, so, all right, Ada. You're in trouble. Yeah, I'm in trouble, you know. I've perhaps reduced it too
sorry,
much.
but...
Okay, yeah, that's fine. According to the genetic code, you're right. What are its implications? What does it mean for people? We've heard what their discovery meant for people.
It's completely different level of science. They produced something that we are using.
Yeah.
Very great. But we produced, if we produced it all, this is knowledge and understanding. And maybe we shed light on some, what we think, fundamental questions. But we didn't, I at least didn't have in mind afterwards to use it directly.
Okay.
I was very lucky to find out that I can do this.
All right.
That there are implications, that we can understand how antibiotics work, that we can understand how resistance starts, and Tom even started the company for
Okay,
that.
so Tom, let's say, because I mean the citation when you all won the prize is that you are warriors in the struggle against the rising tide of incurable bacteria infections and antibiotics. I mean, things like the MRSA bug in hospitals, which we know kill thousands of people all over the world every year. So your work is very important in helping us find a cure for that kind of thing.
What we've been able to do is find out where all these antibiotics bind on the ribosome. And then I and some of my colleagues started a company in 2001, and they have been chemically tying pieces of these antibiotics together to make new antibiotics, sort of hybrid molecules.
It helps, isn't it?
And they're active against MRSA.
I think it's wonderful that Tom started this company, because that's often what it takes to translate a basic discovery into a medically important product. But I also want to make a plea for basic knowledge, and that is, you know, basic knowledge is important for a culture in its own right. And what the structure of the ribosome does is tell us exactly how the information in our genes is actually used to make the products of the genes, which are these proteins that carry out all these myriad functions in the cell. And the reason I don't want to be presumptuous, but you know, when Newton discovered the laws of gravity, or say Watson and Crick discovered a model for the double helix, they had no idea what the implications would be. Newton could not predict that gravity would lead to rocketry and ballistics and so on. And you know, the structure of the double helix, no one could have predicted all of the modern
So we don't
DNA
have to be obsessed
engineering.
about the application of
So you
discoveries. Is that
cannot
what you're
predict.
saying?
And one example of the ribosome is the structure is already enabling people to modify the ribosome to create all sorts of unnatural proteins.
All right, fair point.
And so, you know, which may have different properties and useful properties.
I want to go on to medicine here, because you chemists, you've had your chance now to say what you've won. I want to move on.
Was not it close enough to medicine?
Yeah, medicine. So now you won, and please again, don't get too technical. You all three won for your work on telomeres, and these are chromosome ends which protect genetic material that help provide important information about the aging process, and you discovered what they are and how they are replenished. So Carol, you just tell us. I know Venki said that we shouldn't be obsessed about the applications of your discoveries, but what are the implications then of your work on telomeres?
I'm going to reiterate very much what Venki said, and what we were doing was curiosity-driven science. We were trying to understand how something fundamental in the cell worked. we didn't know at the time that there were very important implications that down the road through work of many people we would discover. And some of those applications have to do with any time cells divide a lot. In cancer and in tissue renewal. Every time cells have to divide for tissue renewal, you need to have these telomeres maintained. So the implications did come, but the initial impetus for doing the research was because we were very curious about the ends of chromosomes.
I want to go on to economics. You won for separate work. Elinor, you worked on, took the view, or rather you challenged the assumption that the only way one can manage resources is either through government, state intervention or privatization. You're saying that there is a diversity of alternatives, and you base a lot of your theory on actually work that you've done abroad, in Africa, for instance.
I've looked at irrigation systems around the world and found that farmers in many parts of the world are able to organize themselves in such a way that they produce crops with irrigated water cheaper than when you have these very fancy engineered works. They have a lot of practical knowledge, and we were getting theory that was kind of underpinning the capabilities of basic humans, but public officials could know all this because the scientists knew everything. And while I like very much my colleagues in my own disciplines and around this table, I have a great respect for people's capacity and ingenuity in the world.
And to you, Oliver Williamson, you put forward the theory of how a firm works and when it is economically efficient to outsource and when it isn't. And people are familiar now with outsourcing, you know, call centres in India. If you live in the United Kingdom, you pick up the phone and you might have somebody in a call centre in India, or I suppose firms making their products in cheaper countries rather than Europe, for instance. And you challenge the kind of boundaries of the firm, if you could give us in a nutshell.
Well, I sort of challenged them, but I also drew on a long literature that was a little bit taking issue with orthodoxy but wasn't making headway. And one of the things I think that is absolutely vital to make headway against orthodoxy is that you have to move beyond provocative ideas and find ways to digest these in an alternative theory from which you can derive predictions, and that you invite empirical testing, and you confront them with the data.
OK, I want to get a sense, actually, of you all as human beings. You've told us what your discoveries are and so on, and what really has inspired you. And I want to start off with you, Carol Greider, because you really overcame huge difficulties in your education from an early age, because you were dyslexic, and took you a while to start reading and so on. Just tell us a little bit about what kind of influences you had in your education early on.
Well, it was just early on when I was in grade school that I had a lot of trouble in school, and I didn't do very well, and so I had to find ways to be able to focus on those things that I did do well on. And although early on it was a challenge, then by finding basically ways to compensate. So when I can't sound out a word, I learned to memorize the words. And it turns out that learning memorization helps greatly in a lot of other disciplines. And it also really taught me to focus on what was important, which I think that then going forward as a scientist really allowed me to screen out the extraneous and focus on what was important. So I think that although I did have some challenges early on in grade school, that the mechanisms that I developed to compensate for them actually served a greater purpose later on in my career, and probably contributed to my being here.
Now, Bill, you had a very unusual education right at the beginning, didn't you?
It certainly is unusual in the sense that my mother homeschooled me up until, I guess, the age of about 12 or 13. There were no schools in the area where I was brought up. My father was a doctor in
Quebec.
In Quebec, doctor in a remote area of Quebec, which was very busy during the winter time, but not during the summer and the rest of the year. And so my mother, who was a nurse and no particular experience in teaching, decided she was going to homeschool me. And so that's exactly what she did. And what I found was that the end, when I had to go to a private school, that indeed I was up pretty well with the average student.
And you spent a lot of time with lumberjacks too, didn't you, Bill?
Well, that's another aspect of it. I don't want to get into that particularly because it is true that the people there during the winter were lumberjacks and big, tough gentlemen, which had an effect on me, I guess, when I went to private school, which was, I guess, a situation that I enjoyed tremendously because I was a bit of a bully in the school, having been with these lumberjacks all my life. I was a pretty tough customer at the age of 12.
That's held in good stead. Yeah. Okay. And George, you?
Well, the one thing that really sticks in my mind is that around the 7th or 8th grade, I somehow got a hold of a booklet put out by Westinghouse, which was written for that level, explaining electronics and atoms and structure. And that was very, very interesting to me. I can still remember some of that booklet. That plus chemistry sets, microscopes, and, well, not being very good at sports, I use these as a matter of enjoyment, actually. I liked it. And
So from an early age, George, you liked the gadgets, didn't you? Hey?
yes, that and mathematics. I was good, very good at mathematics, and if you're good at something, you tend to do it.
Jack?
I was always interested in science, and math, physics, chemistry. My father was an engineer, and he also had an influence, helped build a chemistry lab in the basement. Had a few, dangerous experiments that blew up unintentionally, but still it was a great introduction.
Early influence. Now, Ada, I want to ask you, brought up in Israel, you mentioned your poor background earlier on in the programme, and your father died when you were quite young. And
Yeah, about 11.
About 11.
And
you said,
until then, he was almost all the time ill, either in hospital or just out of the hospital.
you had a tough time
had
growing
an
up.
operation or out of operation.
Right. And you did loads of jobs, cleaning and God
Yeah,
knows what.
when he
help the
was
family.
alive, the life conditions were not so great. We had an apartment. We were living in an apartment of 4 rooms, 3 families with 4 kids all together, 1 toilet, 1 kitchen. So it was not such a great, rich environment.
It was as you said, a slightly.
And when he died, she hardly could get on. She tried very hard. She was a wonderful mother.
All right.
With much less experience than your mother. She didn't even teach me. I had to teach her what percentage is, because her education was very
You had this tremendous curiosity, didn't you, Ada? I mean, tell me about, because you started quite early on carrying out experiments, didn't you?
Yeah, but as a kid.
As a kid, why not? Tell us about one. There was one particularly dangerous one I know about.
There is the one that I still didn't finish.
Which was that?
Measuring the height from the floor to the ceiling of the balcony.
What did you do?
I put furniture one on top of the other, table and chair and a stool and whatever.
How old were you?
About 5, maybe a bit less. I was still in kindergarten, and the kindergarten was downstairs. We were on the 2nd floor, and I climbed, and tried to reach the ceiling with my hand because I still didn't reach it with all the furniture. And then I fell down to the ground floor, and I broke my arm in 11 places. And it was casted, but not correctly, so they had to break it again.
Oh my goodness, so that didn't put you off science for life, clearly.
No,
You persisted.
I'm very surprised about it.
Okay, and give us a book quickly.
And now I came back, and I tried, 2 weeks ago, I tried to measure it correctly, so at least I have the
all these years later to get the
but
answer.
they changed the ceiling.
And what about a book?
The ceiling is in a different height.
You'll never know the answer. One book quickly.
When I was a child, the first one that I read about science was called Discoverer of the World. The Hebrew name was Megalei Olam. It was not geography. It was Madame Curie and Röntgen and several others. And this influenced me a
Marie
lot.
Curie, the first woman, of course, who was ever awarded a Nobel Prize.
Yeah,
and of course
but
she won it
not
for
because
medicine.
of it.
No.
Because of everything else in her life. And the prize did not change much, but added a lot.
That's true. And Elinor, you again mentioned your modest background. Has that in any way helped fashion your kind of intellectual thoughts? You're very much sort of talking about joint ownership and the the abilities of a community to know what's best for it.
Yeah, but I did not have many books around as a kid, and neither of my parents had gone to college. So, I spent a lot of time in the garden, and I spent a lot of time canning in the kitchen. In high school, I was kept out of math because I was a girl. And so I had to take calculus as an assistant professor rather than...
Isn't that shocking, though, that you had to put up with such sexism?
Yeah.
Do you
Well,
think
it's over now, thank goodness. I don't think that would happen today. But
No, I mean, look at all these female Nobel laureates. I mean, 4 of you, terrific. And I just want to throw out 1 or 2 questions now. I want to ask something different rather than about women in science, which is... I want to ask you what you think. If we were having this conversation in a century's time, because I know that practically all of you are from North America, do you think that if we had this conversation in a century's time, that the table would look like this? Venki.
Well, you have to remember that before World War II, Europe dominated science. And the shift went to America after the war. Now, if you look at Japan, Japan's economy started taking off in the 1960s. And you can see that from 20 years later, they're winning an increasing number of Nobel Prizes in Japan. And my prediction is that as the economy of China and Southeast Asia, as those economies become dominant or grow, there will be increasing support for basic science. You already see that in Singapore and in China.
Does everybody agree with that? That perhaps Nobel Prize laureates in the future are going to kind of follow the money, and that money is moving eastwards? As we all know that in this economic downturn.
Well, it's not only the money, but all of us have coming into our laboratories students and postdocs from Asia, particularly China, but also India, and they're very well trained.
But the students
and they're
are coming
very
to
interested.
you. The students are coming to
They're
you at the
coming to
moment.
it,
Will
but
those labs be in
they
Asia?
will go home.
They go home.
And will those labs in future be in Asia?
Well, if you
Yes,
look
I
today
think
at
so.
China,
Yes.
if you look at China today, you see that I think they started like something like 20,000 colleges and universities within the last decade. It's a world that is above and beyond us. But to say that the money is going and we are going after the money is a little bit, in my opinion, too strong.
Okay, but you all agree that in the future this table will not be...
I can tell you on a personal note, when I came to the US, very few Indians would go back to India. That's not true today.
No.
Many Indians are going back.
You wanted to come in briefly on this, Jack?
I think it'll be more widespread. It won't be just one center,
Exactly.
but the whole world will become more equal.
Now, I've got to pick up. We're in this beautiful library, the King's Library at the Royal Palace in Stockholm, and I know we've all been looking around, looking at these beautifully bound books. But do you think people use books so much? Because, I mean, the internet now is presumably, and laboratories where most of you do your research. It's a bit sad in a way. Do you not think that people now don't use solid sort of physical books as they're used to?
I think it's the ideas that count.
It's the ideas,
I don't
doesn't
think
matter.
physically it matters so much whether it's a book written in Gothic text or a book written in very modern text or something where you're reading an electronic book or looking on a screen. I think it's
Doesn't
the
matter.
ideas.
It's the content.
I think
So
the
the
physical
internet
thing
hasn't
doesn't
changed
matter.
the way you think, perhaps?
Oh yes, I think it has.
It has
but-
changed the way you think.
different question.
That's a different question.
Yes.
But it has nothing to do with reading.
But I'll tell you, the internet is a great leveler because when I was growing up in India, it was very hard to get the latest journals, the latest papers. Information now is much more readily accessible and levels the playing field because of the internet.
Yeah, and when you teach, it's really
for
different
information.
because we used to convey the information to the students. Now they can get the information, and now we actually have to teach. We have to teach more in a way. Before, we had to just tell them what things were. Now they can find all that, and it's made teaching and ideas much more interesting because you have to convey more than just what the content was.
Carol, do you think there are other ways the internet has changed?
It really allows collaboration much more readily for people from various countries to get together and do experiments, and that is a way that people can come together to solve some sort of a common problem, and then also come to understand each other. So I think that it really does contribute to mutual understanding of different cultures by people coming together.
George and Bill, because I mean, you were working when there was no you're a bit like an old married couple, you two, really, haven't you? Been working together for decades, but no internet.
As an old guy, I use the internet too, but I'm just wondering if it's really all that wonderful. I think there's another mechanism that has to take place of distillation of information. In other words, if you look with regard to physics, it seems to me that in the past, certain schools of physics were responsible for the major changes in the whole science of physics. And now, does that mean that with the internet that you're going to get lots and lots of these centers or not? I don't know. I don't think I have a feeling yet which way it's going to go, because I think you still need some kind of brain that sort of takes the information and distills it a little bit, and not just is what I think of when I think of the internet.
Related to that, actually. I mean, I think the internet has been very liberating, but I read in a very argumentative way, and if I have papers in front of me or hardbound books in front of me and take issue with the subject matter as I move through it, that's much more satisfying than doing the same thing on the internet. And maybe that's just that these argumentative skills can be developed with reference to the internet, but it hasn't been the same experience for me.
All right. So what does the future hold then for all of you ladies and gentlemen? I mean, both Bill and George have retired. I think they're the only two who've really been retired for many, many years. I mean, George, there is life after science, isn't there? Because you went sailing around the world with your wife, Peggy, for 17 years.
That's right. We got lost.
Oh, well, is that why it took so long? It was an original plan for just 3 months, and then you spent 17 years. So you've enjoyed your retirement, haven't you? I mean, have you stopped doing science altogether?
Essentially, yes. I have recognized that as you grow older and your body gets a little weaker, that if you're honest with yourself, so does your mind.
Bill?
Well, I can tell you one thing that I enjoy tremendously now, and that's art. In other words, I was involved in science for a while, and I liked that, and then mathematics. But now I find that art offers a challenge of a different kind, but also very satisfying. In other words, there's a whole different kind of area to be explored here that I enjoy tremendously right now. Okay. So there's hope for everybody, even old people.
So you see, life after science. I mean, not one of you mentioned a novel that had inspired you. So just go quickly around the table. Okay, you, Jack. I mean, is there life after science?
I'm not ready to think about that. I'm still very engaged. I'm most interested in the experiments we're doing right now. Okay. And I want to keep doing that work.
Oliver?
Well, I actually have retired, so I'm not teaching, but I keep a pretty active schedule and working on own projects and joint projects with young colleagues, and hope to keep chugging along.
Elizabeth, you want to win more prizes now you've got the Nobel Prize?
No, the prize is to do science. I mean, that's what I love to do. But I think to the point of what you do as you change with age, and you should. I learned from fencing that, you know, a wily 70-year-old can outfox a young teenager in fencing by just being smarter about it, even though they don't necessarily have the agility. So I think what we can do with our minds as they age is sort of use the wiliness that we've accumulated and help the young scientists do exciting science without necessarily having that sort of same dynamic of discovery
That's
that you
true.
might have had when you're younger.
Because Elinor, I mean, society is often obsessed with youth and wanting to retire people at 60, 65, and you've got this huge bank of knowledge that is still obviously so useful, isn't it?
Well, I'm enjoying teaching. I have several research projects going and working with young people. We've always had the sense of young, medium, and old folks working together, and
Long may that last.
well, I hope.
Okay, Carol.
Well, I have several full-time jobs at the moment. I'm a mom of a 10 and a 13-year-old, so I can't really think about retiring, as well as all of my other multiple jobs that I have. So I'm having fun just doing all of those.
No, it's just, is there life after science? You like sailing, don't you, Venki? You've got
I
a
don't
canoe.
like sailing, but I have lots of hobbies and interests. I
Yeah.
like reading and cycling and hiking and things like that. So my life is actually, and music. My son is a professional musician. So I think, you know, I have a very rich life, and science is part of that. And I just don't think that balance is going to change. Perhaps as I get older, the balance may shift to perhaps less work and more of my outside interest.
Sure.
Well, I hope to carry on as usual for the moment. I like working in the lab, and people in the lab. It's terrific. I like gardening. I'll carry on with my gardening. I like cooking. I'll carry on with my cooking. And as Venki says, well, the mix may change as time passes, but there's lots of interesting stuff to do.
Do you cook with a scientist's precision?
I like hiking.
Do you?
And there's so many. Oh, of course.
Do you cook and weigh everything carefully?
Oh, indeed. My wife gets sort of wonders about that because I have to measure it out. I say, well, it's chemistry
Oh,
after
that's
all.
a scientist cooking. Yeah, okay. You've all spoken. Ada, last word to you. Is there
Earlier
life
you
after
asked
science?
me if I'm going to rest, and I said resting is very hard work.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to answer this question. I think that I'll go on working because I like it, but I have some other dreams. For years and years I wanted to start writing, and I have some prose writing, and maybe I will be able now to get some time to do this. But interest in life is very important. One can find it in very many ways. I think that I'll stay a bit with ribosomes. Maybe not forever, ever, but for some time.
Okay, well, very appropriate to end this discussion, this conversation with you Nobel laureates on a nice technical word like ribosome. So thank you all very much. You know, I really enjoyed talking to you all, and I've been very struck by all of you, really, in the sense that even from a very early age, you obviously all had a very intense curiosity about how the world works. And for those of you watching at home, can science save the world? Well, I think perhaps we have given you some answers to that. From me, Zeinab Badawi, in the King's Library in the Royal Palace in Stockholm, goodbye.